Inoue right now is one of those guys in the sport of boxing that, he excites me a lot. He a guy that got, everything that you need to put a great fight together. He's got speed. He's very precise. He's very aware. His reflexes. This is a guy that could do it all, right? He could fight on the front foot, fight on the back foot. You know, we've seen a lot of his movement, in the ring against Nakatani, and it just looked like he just getting in his groove. He getting more comfortable under those lights. And for me, it's just gonna be interesting to see what he does going forward, right? Undisputed now. You at the top of those lower divisions, and right now in the sport of boxing, especially in 2026, a lot of people are more willing to move up. A lot of people are more willing to move up for a big fight, right? Especially a career-defining fight. We've seen it time and time again, and we'll continue to see it in the sport of boxing. And I feel like Inoue should follow that trend. I would love to see him fight Carrington. I think that'll be a big fight in New York. New York has a big Asian population. Carrington has a lot of support in New York. And both of these guys have a lot of fans, right? I feel like we've seen Inoue take these risks before. We just haven't seen him take these risks, being willing to, travel here and fight the biggest guy here, right? We've seen Fulton take that risk, and I think it's just time for him to take that risk. Give some of these guys an opportunity. He gave Fulton that opportunity. If Fulton would have beat Inoue at that time, he would have been a star at that point. And I feel like he should give Carrington that opportunity. Carrington is a guy, he got a lot of backing. He got a lot of skills. He could fight. The borough, of Brooklyn is very strong. They're very supportive, and I don't feel like it's gonna be hard to sell that fight. I feel like if a guy like Stephen Fulton could get a fight like that, a guy like Neri can get a fight like that, I believe a guy like Shushu definitely deserves a fight like that. We've seen Shushu for a long time putting in a lot of work. He's been getting better from fighting. It's just, it's unfortunate that we seen a lot of guys with a lot of skills on the back burner for so long. Shu represent the sport well. Inoue is a guy, like I always say, in my breakdowns with him, he's a guy that's always willing to step up, fight the best. He come in fight night and he show up, So it's just interesting to see if he'll take on that fight with Shu. It's a fight that I like to see at the beginning of 2027.